Good evening. So tonight we're going to conclude the 18th chapter of the Gospel of John tonight, and we're going to start talking about Jesus' trial before Pilate. Now, keep in mind he's already had three illegal religious trials, and now he goes into some civil trials, and they will be illegal also, all because of the Jewish leaders who are wanting Jesus to be put to death. So the Jewish leaders, they had one more hurdle to clear in reaching their goal to put Jesus to death. And here's the problem. The Romans did not allow the Jews to put anyone to death. They did not allow the Jews to issue capital punishment upon anybody. So the only person in Jerusalem who had any kind of power to sentence Jesus and actually see him crucified was the governor, and we all probably know his name. His name is Pontius Pilate. Very interesting character. We'll talk a little about him tonight and even next week. Somehow, though, the Jewish leaders had to convince Pilate that Jesus needed to be put to death. This is their hurdle. This is their big hurdle that they had to clear. And as we will see, this was not going to be easy for them to do this. Pilate was not an easy man for the Jews to like. He was cold. He was proud. He was cruel. And they even say that he was very, very superstitious. And so Pilate wasn't an easy man for the Jews to like at all. He cared more about his political power than he did doing what was right, justice. He hated the Jews, and he found the Jews to be very, very difficult to govern. And so he hated Jewish laws. He hated Jewish traditions. He thought they were stupid, and needless to say, there was no deep love between Pilate and the Jews, especially the Jewish leaders. But the Jewish leaders needed Pilate. They needed to convince him. They needed to make sure that he would do what they wanted to for them to see Jesus crucified. So we'll begin in verse 28 and 28 through 31 here. Jesus' trial before Caiaphas ended in the early power. Now, Caiaphas, if you remember, he was the high priest at the time, and so his trial before Caiaphas ended in the early hours of the morning. Then he was taken to the headquarters of the Roman governor. His accusers didn't go inside because it would defile them, and they wouldn't be allowed to celebrate the Passover. So Pilate, the governor, went out to them and asked, "What is your charge against this man?" "We wouldn't have handed him over to you if he weren't a criminal," they retorted. "Then take him away and judge him by your own law," Pilate told them. "Only the Romans are permitted to execute someone," the Jewish leaders replied. So, Jesus stayed at the high priest's house for about 2 or 3 more hours after his trial, and before he was taken to the Roman governor Pilate. The Jewish law did not allow the Jewish leaders to enter a house that was occupied by a Gentile. If they did, they would be considered unclean. They were not able to worship in the temple, nor were they able to participate in the Passover meal that was upon them. It was coming. So it's now about between 6 and 7 o'clock in the morning, roughly, and the people of the city were beginning to stir. They were getting ready for the Passover celebration, and but they also knew that there was something going on. See, not everyone in the city was up all night like Jesus and the religious leaders and the guards and the soldiers and Pilate, they were all up doing what they were doing. They were trying Jesus. But now, Jesus has spent all night, no sleep, exhausted. He had gone through a night of hate and lies, beatings, disappointment, injustice. And I imagine that his sleepless body ached from all the beatings and basically all the stress that he was under at this time. Let's look at verse 29 one more time. So Pilate the governor went out and he asked them, "What is your charge against this man?" So because they couldn't go into the house, Pilate would step outside and basically he asked them, "What is your charge against this man Jesus? What are you charging him with?" And in asking this question, Pilate was just following normal procedures, Roman procedures. He simply wanted to know what Jesus was being charged with. This seems fair. In verse 30, we read, or let's read it again. We read, here's what the religious leaders said: "We wouldn't have handed him over to you if he weren't a criminal." You can hear the cynicism in their voice. Again, they didn't like Pilate. Pilate didn't like them. He didn't like their laws. He didn't like their traditions. He didn't like anything about them. And so he says, "What are you charging him with?" They said, "We wouldn't have brought him if he wasn't guilty." It was as though they were saying to Pilate, "You need to stay out of our business. We've already found him guilty. And give us what we want. We want Jesus crucified," is what they're saying. They wanted Pilate to know that the Sanhedrin, which consisted of 70 men in the Jewish hierarchy there, they were considered basically the highest court in Israel, more like the Supreme Court of Israel, but there were 70 of them. They investigated this case and they found Jesus guilty. So it's like they were saying to Pilate, "Don't ask us for any details, just give us what we want." So it seems that Pilate didn't completely understand why the Jewish leaders brought Jesus to him in the first place. And frankly, Pilate never wanted to be bothered with their petty Jewish cases. In verse 31, Pilate's answer forced the Jewish leaders to make a very, very painful statement. Only the Romans, the Jewish leaders admitted this, and it was painful for them to have to do this. They said only the Romans can execute somebody. So you can see it's like Pilate's got the upper hand, but they're putting pressure on Pilate to do what they wanted him to do. So here Pilate made the Sanhedrin admit their need to comply with the Roman law, a law that they hated. And so the Jewish leaders could try cases among themselves. They could punish convicted persons to a point. But they were not allowed to put anyone to death ever without Roman approval. So you could see this arm wrestling going back and forth between Pilate and the Jewish leaders. Verse 32, let's read that. It says that this fulfilled Jesus' prediction about the way that he would die. So Pilate's answer forced the Jewish leaders to make this painful statement. But down in verse 32, the Jewish method of putting someone to death was by stoning. Okay? But God, in his plan, decided that Jesus was to die on a cross, not to be stoned to death. You remember back in John chapter 12 when we studied we talked about verses 32 and 33 where Jesus said, "And when I am lifted up from the earth, I will draw all men to myself." He said this to indicate how he was going to die. So Jesus was already telling him that he would be lifted up. If I am lifted up, I will draw all men unto me. So he's talking about his crucifixion here already. Verses 33 through 35, let's look at those. Then Pilate went back to his headquarters and called for Jesus to be brought to him. "Are you the king of the Jews?" he asked him. Jesus replied, "Is this your own question, or did others tell you about me?" And Pilate said to him, "Am I a Jew? Your own people and their own leading priests brought you to me for trial. Why? What have you done?" So, the Jewish leaders were somewhat surprised that Pilate would want to even hear the charges against Jesus. The fact of the matter was that their charge against Jesus was of a religious nature. Pilate didn't care about that. He really didn't. He didn't care about their laws. He didn't care about their traditions. He didn't care about their religion. So they condemned Jesus, the religious leaders did, for claiming to be the Son of God. And the fact of the matter is that their charge was against Jesus was religious in nature, and again, Pilate didn't care about that. They knew that Pilate would not be interested in crucifying a man that was caught up in some religious squabbles. So, on the spot, the religious leaders were trying to come up to, were trying to put together charges against Jesus, and they had to come up with a charge that they thought would get Pilate's attention. Okay, so they came up with one. In Luke, so we're going to go back, we're going to go to the Gospel of Luke, because John doesn't cover this like Luke does right here, but in Luke 23, 1 and 2, let's go there. Luke 23. 1 and 2. Then the entire council took Jesus to Pilate, the Roman governor. They began to state their case. "This man has been leading our people astray by telling them not to pay their taxes to the Roman government, by claiming that he is the Messiah, a king." Okay, this was going to get Pilate's attention here. These charges were downright lies. Jesus never said that. What they charged him with there, they never said that. The charge, or Jesus never said that. The charge that Jesus made of himself out to be a king, it really grabbed Pilate's attention. And Pilate knew that Palestine was not a very secure, or as secure as some of the other regions of the Roman Empire. So anyone who claimed to be a king could likely get a following, and but the Roman law stated that there was only one king, and his name was Caesar. And so Pilate was aware that he could lose his job if he was to lose Palestine to an uprising, or because of one man, and others have tried to do that in the past. But Jesus was different. Pilate was aware that he could lose his job, and so he was trying to investigate the charges against Jesus. Let's go to verses 33 and 35 back in John. Jesus said, Pilate said, "Am I a Jew? Your own people and their leading priests brought you to me for trial. Why? What have you done?" And so Pilate became aware that he wasn't going to learn too much about Jesus just by listening to these Jewish leaders. He's hearing all the loud noises out in the courtyard, not inside the building because they couldn't go in, but he was hearing all those loud charges against Jesus. And I mean, if the whole Sanhedrin was there, that was at least 70 people, and then there were others that were there also. It could have been well up to 100 and some people that were outside making these charges against Jesus. But then he takes a look on the inside and sees Jesus' silence. He decides to go and talk to Jesus alone. So he walks back into the judgment hall and he says to Jesus, "Are you the king of the Jews?" First of all, Jesus wanted to know the intent of Pilate's question. He said, "Do you want to know because you think I'm trying to lead a revolution or an insurrection against Rome? Or are you just mouthing the charges that you heard from those on the outside?" And so Jesus asked him that question. He said, do you want to know because you really want to know? Or do you want to know because others have told you that and that's what you're saying? You're just repeating what they're saying. Pilate's response was, "Am I a Jew?" Now you got to hear the sarcasm there. Okay? He didn't like the Jews, and he says, so what, "I'm no Jew. What am I, a Jew?" Or your own people and their leading priests. He says, "They're the ones that handed you over to me. And why? Why would they come to me? I don't care to even be involved in this." You can see the cowardness of Pilate also here. He says, "What have you done?" See, Pilate was far too proud to acknowledge a personal curiosity about Jesus. He didn't want to be connected with what he saw to be just religious superstition. In verses 36 and 37, let's go there. Jesus answered this. He says, "My kingdom," because he's asking, are you the king of the Jews? He says, "My kingdom is not an earthly kingdom. If it were, my followers would fight to keep me from being handed over to Jewish leaders. But my kingdom is not of this world." Pilate said, "So you are a king?" Jesus responded, "You say I am a king. Actually, I was born and came into the world to testify to the truth, and all who love the truth recognize that what I say is true." So Jesus' answer to Pilate was really amazing. He said, "My kingdom is not of this world." Jesus' answer totally ignores Pilate's question about what he had done to bring down the wrath of the religious leaders upon him. So here Jesus begins to talk to Pilate about spiritual matters. He wanted to share with Pilate what his kingdom was really all about. Jesus tells him that his kingdom is not from this world. His kingdom does not come from earth, but it comes from heaven. Jesus is wanting to share this important truth with him. His kingdom does not need any boundaries. It doesn't need any soldiers. His kingdom rules over hearts and consciousness of believers. That's where his kingdom rules. It's not about boundaries and geographical boundaries and soldiers and all. That's not what his kingdom is about. He said if he wanted to be king over an earthly kingdom, over an earthly realm, his men, his disciples, would have fought to keep him from being arrested in the first place. But you remember he stopped them. The very incident that Peter was involved in, Jesus stopped Pilate and said, "Put down the sword. Those who live by the sword die by the sword." And remember, we talked about how much in control Jesus was, and Jesus is remaining in control over this whole time. It was hard for Pilate to believe that there was a kingdom that was not of this world. In verse 37, Pilate says, "So you are a king." He's asking the question, so you are a king? This question gave Jesus opportunity to explain what he meant by a king. He was talking about a different kind of king from a different kind of kingdom, one that has never lived on planet Earth before. His kingdom was from another world, and that he came into this world, Jesus said, I came into this world to show people the truth. Jesus came to reflect who God was, his Father. That's why he came. It was God he was God among us, because they are the same. People who are in this special kingdom are those who have found the truth in Jesus. Anyone can find truth in Jesus. And because Jesus is the King of truth. He says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Anyone who's going to get to God's going to go through me. So in verse 38, Pilate asked this question, what is truth? Just what is truth? And before Jesus could answer, it appears that Pilate went out to the Jewish leaders and said this, he's not guilty of any crime. It's ironic that Pilate walked away from the only one person who could have shown him and explained to him what ultimate truth was. He would have told him about a loving God, a loving Father who wanted to see his life changed and really become something. So Pilate's having an issue himself with what truth really is, but Jesus is the way and he is the truth. Verses 39 and 40. Let's go there. But you have a custom of asking me to release one prisoner. Now Pilate's back out there talking to the religious leaders. This is where he thinks he's going to get out of all this. Okay? He said, I find no fault in him. He is not guilty of any crime. But verse 39, but you have a custom of asking me to release one prisoner each year at Passover. Would you like me to release this king of the Jews? But they all shouted back, no, not this man. We want Barabbas. Now, Barabbas. Pilate couldn't find any reason to execute Jesus. He really wanted Jesus to be set free. He really wanted the Jewish leaders to agree with him that there was no fault in Jesus, but they would not. They refused. Instead, they asked for the release of Barabbas, a criminal, a murderer, a revolutionary who would often fight against Rome. I imagine Barabbas had been in prison several times. And because the Jews hated the Romans, Barabbas was probably somewhat popular with them. So Jesus died instead of Barabbas. Barabbas deserved punishment, but he became free because Jesus took his punishment. You know, I got to thinking we too are much like Barabbas. We deserve punishment also. But we've realized that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. We've received him as Savior and Lord of our lives, if we've in fact done that, if you're out there listening and you've done that. You know, Jesus has made a difference and a change in us. And so he has freed us. He took our punishment. And just like Barabbas, you know, I don't know whatever became of Barabbas. Nobody does. The scriptures don't tell us this. But he was set free. And Jesus paid his punishment just like he paid for the punishment of all of us. So that's it for tonight. We'll get into chapter 19 next week. And it gets even better and better. So you're going to fall in love with Jesus all over again before we're done with all this. Amen. God bless you. Have a great night, and we'll see you Sunday. Bye.